Sacred Heart University. For those of you who are not here this morning or who don't know me, I know many of you. I'm Bill Usman. I'm the director of the brand new Media Literacy and Digital Culture graduate program here at Sacred Heart University. And we have collaborated with ACME on co-sponsoring and hosting this event for you all today, also with support and advice and help from the Project Censored people who are here. So it's great to see everybody. We're going to get started tonight, and we're going to have the main event, craziness, circus will all be tomorrow. But we are going to start tonight with a great keynote speaker. Just before we do that, I want to acknowledge my colleague, Dr. Lori Bindig, who just opened the door for somebody because she does it all. She's been doing a tremendous amount of work behind the scenes to pull this off. But there's another person who does an amazing amount of work that nobody notices, but without that work being done, it would be impossible to do anything around here. And that is our administrative assistant, Suzanne Golu. But this doesn't even come close to acknowledging how much she did for us. And I'm not going to bore you too much. I'm going to say a few other things tomorrow morning, but right now I'd like to turn it over to Rob Williams, one of the co-presidents of ACME.
Hi everybody. How's everyone? So we've had a really fun day today at the media education training. We had a small but merry band of about 25 folks from all over the country, and it's a really vibrant conversation, and I'm still recovering. My head is very full. But we're in for a real treat tonight. I'm going to introduce the board and talk a little bit about ACME tomorrow, but without further ado, I want to introduce to you an old friend and colleague from the hills of Vermont, Dr. Elaine Young. Elaine and I have taught together at Champlain College for a long time. And right? Yeah. And she's just written a magnificent book. It's called Tuned In Family. There's information about this book circulating in all of your packets for the summit. She's a professor of business at Champlain College, has been for a long time. She's trained not quite a generation, but almost a generation of our students in social media and digital media and business. She's an incredibly innovative thinker and a really compassionate person, and really interested in the impact of the digital age on families and children. So we thought she would be a magnificent person to kick off our summit this weekend for the Action Coalition for Media Education. So please welcome Dr. Elaine.
Thank you all, and Rob, thank you for that wonderful introduction.
It's good to see you, Elaine.
I will say that Rob has been my partner in crime for quite a few years. There was a point, and I'm sure you can't imagine this, working in a school of business about 12, 11 years ago, where I'm really involved in the digital side of things, and then things like Facebook start showing up, and business faculty are like, what is that? And Rob was all about what it was. And so we would often commiserate, and so I didn't feel kind of the lone person on campus who was playing in this space. So that was a good person to have around to sort of talk about things and have great conversations about, hey, did you hear about this thing? And are you doing this thing? And so that was good. So of course, in the time that we've been kind of hanging out, my computer has gone to sleep because that's what technology does for all of us. So I will not talk and type my password at the same time. Yeah, I remember. Yep, yeah, that's for sure. We were. Well, it is. And you know, I remember when Twitter launched, I was teaching my digital marketing class, and I said to my students, hey, we should try this out. And my students were like, why? And I had like 2 or 3 students who decided to play with me in this space, right? And at the time, there was Pounce. Yeah, right? Yeah, no. There was Plurk. What? What was that? And there was this thing called Twitter. They all did the same thing. Small amount of characters, share information with a group of people, right? Some were more visual than others. And we played around with it, and it was at the moment when we really started getting into the pre-stuff for the campaign for Obama, and they did a live tweeting thing. They were just like, try this thing with a hashtag. And I was like, wait. And I watched this, and I realized that Facebook was one thing, but this was something completely different. Right? This was going to change things in really amazing ways. And it's fabulous to see where, now that was, Twitter just celebrated its 10th birthday, right? You all knew that, had a party, liked it, right? Where has that little tool gone? How has that little tool evolved? How has Facebook evolved? How are all of these tools changing, and how are they changing us and how we communicate? And that is a fascinating thing. Do I have any Snapchatters in here? Oh, nice, nice. So those of you who are using Snapchat, how long have you been using it? Year and a half? Couple years? 3? Okay, early adopter, because it's about 4 years old, 3 or 4 years old. How do you feel about how Snapchat has changed over the past 3 years? Love it?
Oh,
yeah.
My sister and I were just swapping our faces last night.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact.
Yeah. But that tool originally was for one-to-one communication that would go away. You know, air quotes, it doesn't really go away, but we all know that. And it was very unfriendly to brands. But Snapchat needs to make money. And Snapchat is releasing a whole bunch of tools now that are very brand friendly to allow brands to communicate more one-on-one with people. And so we have all ways of it making money to brand. So brands like, say, Sacred Heart could even have like filters that go over so people could Snapchat and put that special filter over, right? And this is the evolution of communication technologies and the intersection of business and, you know, my love, marketing, which I don't know, might be a bad thing in this room, I don't know. But that's the angle that I come from when I think about how these tools are changing the way we communicate together, but then thinking about brands and business and what that means, right? So we get at, I think, a little bit of what I'm about as we get into this conversation. So first, I have to be honest that, of course, I am on Twitter. I'm EJ Young67 on Twitter. I welcome you to follow me there. I'm also that on Facebook, Snapchat, and pretty much anything. If you search for that, you find me. And we have our hashtag, which also works on Instagram and, you know, Twitter. So feel free to live tweet or do any of that thing. I will not be offended. So when Rob asked if I would talk today, and I gave it a lot of thought, and we're doing a lot of appreciative inquiry work at Champlain College, envisioning what something could be, not problem solving, but thinking about where could we go, where could we take something. And I decided to frame my presentation around this question because I don't think we have media literate communities today. And I think given the plethora, I don't use that word lightly, of channels that we have and ways in which we can communicate with one another. Our society today is unable to manage that. And I'm thinking, well, why is that? At a community level, why is it so hard? What is going on here that's making this so difficult for us? And so I really thought about that, and I thought, okay, well, let's think about where we are today. And think about some big things that we hear a lot about in the media. We talk about tweens and teens using media. How are they using media? They're on screens all the time. I just read an article the other day, which I can't remember what it was from, that was really highlighting why screens are really, really, really bad for kids.
Like they're getting hyperactive and angrier, easier, and because it's not because I'm playing a video game where I'm killing things. It's because I'm just taking too much information in at a time and I just can't process it all. And so I just can't calm down, right? It's that kind of overwhelming kind of feeling. And young brains are developing, older brains, not so much. And so there's this medical world of what's going on there, but then there's the society world of what are they doing and why are they doing it. And then there's parents who are going, why are you on the screen all the time? And like we have all of these challenges. But we as adults are using media a lot. And I think about my evolution as an individual who uses media, loves media. I started out in college going into broadcast. I actually am one of those people who has a real FCC radio license. I don't think they do those anymore. Do they even do those anymore? Right? You know? And went through the process and was a comm major and learned a bunch of stuff and did a bunch of stuff before we had all these things, right? And we still got the job done. How are parents coping with media issues with their children? Right? When I wrote my book, it was clear that parents were struggling with this. And my book came out 2 years ago already, 2014. And they were trying to figure this out. And some people thought they had it figured out, and other people thought they didn't have it figured out, and most people just felt overwhelmed. And the question is, are we still feeling that way 2 years later? And I would argue that maybe parents are getting better at it, and maybe not. We'll have to think about that. And then, of course, our children spend so much time in education. And I've really been thinking about this a lot because I realize I've got a group of seniors who are getting ready to graduate, to head out into their professional lives. And I realized their whole life has been in a classroom. And the transition from classroom to boardroom to workroom to space is so much more difficult today than it was when I did it. I'm wondering, why is that? Why does that seem so big of a difference now? And what's going on there? So it's something to think about. And I think media technologies might actually have something to do with that. And then I think a favorite topic for ACME folks is who owns our media channels anyway? And what I'm going to talk about, I think, is no surprise to anybody, and yet maybe there might be a little surprise in there. We'll see. Give you a little teaser. So when I wrote my book, Amy Jo Martin, who is a woman who is a digital media consultant and coach, which I think I should do that. That sounds like a great job. She said that the way your kids use social today will shape their future. And this was in 2013, and she's basically talking about this whole idea of a personal brand online. Everything I do online, I'm leaving this trail of who I am, where I've been. And that's fine if you're an adult and you have decided that that's the choice you want to make. But what does it mean for the unborn baby whose now picture is up on all the Facebooks of the friends as they're looking at that ultrasound? And what does it mean to the kid in the Little League where the Little League coach went and put that picture on Facebook and all the families liking it, and so it's now all over, right? What does that mean when you don't have a say in where your likeness goes, and it's now part of the internet, right? This big web of stuff. I write about this in my book. When I was little, my parents took this fabulous picture of me, I guess it was very cute at the time, sitting on the potty chair with a banjo. It's a lovely picture. Thankfully, nobody actually ever gets to see that picture because it's in a box, and every once in a while I'll take it out and laugh, and my daughter will laugh, and it's good, right? For our children today, they're growing up online. And not because they want to, but just because that's the way it is. Every picture I take with my phone, my kid is out there, right? And that's something to think about, that living online is it's just a part of who we are. I don't know if that's good or bad, but it is where we are. That's where we're at right now. So I'm hoping one day to meet Dr. Heitner. She does some amazing, amazing work, and I don't know if you've paid attention to her work, but she's really talking a lot about young people and digital technologies. And her focus is really on empathy. How are our young people learning? Are they learning empathy? Is that happening? What's going on here? So she's got some fabulous work. But this idea of a third space, and I'd really like you to hold on to this as we talk about this today, because especially for parents as you think about how they manage some of this. And I see this with my college students, and I don't know, are there any K-12 educators in here tonight? Are you seeing this with your students? That this is really a space, and it's the hanging out concept. You can see, there's always this joke where you see young people sitting in a room and they're all staring at their phones and you think, gosh, they're not interacting with anybody. And yet they could all be interacting with each other. They're just doing it through their screen, right? We don't really know. So there's this third space, this additional space where they can be connected. And what does that mean to someone who doesn't know what it's like to not be connected? And what does disconnected mean to someone like that versus someone like me? I'm going to be 50 next year, and I am super connected, but I also can easily disconnect. And I remember what it was like to not be connected. And our young people have no idea until they get into someone's classroom like Cheryl's, and she says, for 24 hours, turn off your stuff. And they freak out, right? What are they, 18 or 19, Cheryl? Yeah, first years. And they're like, for 24 hours. 24 hours. Only use your phone to actually talk to somebody. Right? What does that mean? These are people who, like, they just don't even know what that means. And then to talk to somebody on the telephone, that's a whole other problem. Right? So I'm sure you're all familiar with Common Sense Media. If you're not, it's a great online resource for families and parents. And they do a lot about TV reviews, game reviews, but they also have a fabulous section on information for families who are thinking about issues around screen time and digital technologies. And they've done a recent study about how teens and tweens are using social media and content. And these are some things that I pulled out that I thought would be kind of fun to think about. So, you know, I don't know why this one surprised me. It should not have surprised me. American teens use an average of 9 hours of media a day. And I thought about that for a minute, and I thought, my initial reaction was, wow, that's a lot. And then I thought about my day, and I thought about how much media I use in a day. And I thought, well, maybe it's not just the teens who are doing it. Maybe we all are, right? Tweens use 6 hours, probably because when we look at them when they're 10 or 9, we're saying, oh, no screens. But by the time they're 14, they're off in school, they're doing homework, whatever, and we just, go do your thing. But perhaps what I found particularly interesting to me was that watching TV, like TV, and listening to music are still their top things that they're doing. It's still a big thing. And boys and girls use media differently. Is that a surprise to any folks here, that they would be using it very differently? Right, so video games and listening to music for boys, girls music, read, social media. Girls at that age are just more social, so they're probably connecting with their friends that way. So some interesting things to think about how teens and tweens are using these tools. This is the one that I think is particularly important, especially for educators. And I don't know, I do it. I catch myself doing it. I've got multiple screens up. I'm listening to the radio. I'm trying to do something else. I open up Facebook in one window. My cell phone goes off over here. I'm texting over here. I've got work in front of me. So the question I would ask here, is this a kid thing or is this a media thing? And are we all sort of doing this? But we like to talk about our kids because, oh my gosh, we got to do something about the kids, but are we really ready to start thinking about, hey, if I had to really think about how much time I do and what am I multitasking on, and I know better. I know I can't actually do my work the best way that way, but I still do it anyway. What's going on there? So the study has a lot of other things in it that I would highly recommend you take a look at, but top one, entertainment media is ubiquitous in the lives of teens and tweens. I guess my question, is that any different than any other time? I mean, I think that's an important thing to think about when you look at studies like this, right? A lot of it is about we've got screen time, screen time, screen time. But I remember how important media was in my life as a teenager, and granted that media was the movies, TV, and radio. But now we just have more channels for that, right? So young people are primarily content consumers rather than content creators. Is that a surprise to anybody? Because there's this idea that we're Snapchatting and we're YouTubing and we're doing all this stuff and all these kids are doing all of these things, but I find most of my students that come into a marketing program are not creators of content. They are consumers and users, but it's a very small microcosm of students that come to Champlain who are actually truly people who want to create with these tools. And they happen to not go to the business school, so. And it's always important for us to keep in mind socioeconomic and racial ethnic differences and use. I think that's incredibly important because that is a big deal for our country and our world going forward. There's a lot of assumptions that people make and they forget that. And I think this study really highlights the importance of that. And again, as I said, TV and listening to music. I mean, it's a big thing, right? So that's our young people. But what about the rest of us, right? So because it's so easy to talk about young people and not look at ourselves and think about, as an adult, how am I using these tools? And the Pew Research Center, their recent study, and they are always updating this data, but for 68% of Americans have smartphones, and that number has pretty much been going this way, right? I mean, we're becoming a mobile society. And there are many people now who don't even have a desktop computer because they can do everything they need on a tablet. And I mean, there's more power in my phone than in some computers I've had in my lifetime, right? I mean, there's like so much going on this little thing. Way more than the first computer I ever had, which was a TRS-80 Model 1. Radio Shack, yeah. You know, they're gone, aren't they gone too? No, they're sort of there. They're by a thread, right? And to think about the fact that when my father brought that interesting machine home one night, and I was in, well, 70, I think it was 77, something like that. So I was 10. What's this thing? It's a screen, a keyboard, and a cassette player. And you put the cassette in the thing, and you hit play, and a little cursor showed up on the screen, and then you had to tell it to do something. And it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. And to think that in my lifetime we've gone from that blinking cursor to what we have today is pretty mind-blowing. So, most commonly owned devices, cell phone including smartphones, 92% of US adults own that. Desktop, laptop computer, 73%. Tablet computer, 45%. So the Pew Center does the set of surveys, and this data is from 2015, so March to April and June to July 2015. And I like to watch how this changes over time because you just see how things have really moved. So what does this mean for families? So we've got our teens and tweens, ubiquitous media consumption, blah, blah, blah. We've got our adults and parents on the smartphones and connected. And as I said, when I wrote my book, it was all about this stuff, right? It was parents being afraid and young people going off in the corner sexting, and it was all this dark, scary stuff, right? And here we are 2 years gone by, and now what Pew Research Center is showing in their research is that it's really that parents are working really hard to strike a balance. They're trying to figure out, wait a minute, the tools are there, my children are using these tools, how do I do this, and how do we do this in a way that's responsible? And they're actually having conversations, right, that I think are really interesting. right? So you have parents who are saying that they're doing the digital grounding, which I think is fabulously interesting, right? Keep this in mind. Grounding meant you can't see your friends, right? In my day, it was like you stay in your room, you cannot come down the hallway to pick up the telephone, and you cannot see your friends. In today's day and age, I take the cell phone away and take away the internet privileges. Remember that third space, right? What's harder, right? I mean, is that the same thing as what happened to me when I made poor choices as a young person? Because I argue that this is probably even worse. I just think I have a feeling that this is harder because the way screens are for us and that connectivity is for us pulls at our brains in a different way. So I would say that that's probably a pretty harsh punishment for someone. Thankfully, my daughter's 19, so I don't have to do that stuff to her. And then a lot of people limit the amount of time or times of day when children can go online. In my book, I talk a lot about that challenge because how do you know the difference between them doing homework and if the schools are pushing them to use these tools? And if the homework takes a while, you can't just limit like an hour of screen time. You have to be really thoughtful. And I think this research is showing that while parents are doing this, they're also having really good conversations now. And this was not data that was around when I wrote my book. So this is really great to see that they're talking about behavior in school, home, and social lives. They're talking about what's okay to share online, what's not okay to share online. What's okay to view online? What content would you consume? What behavior towards others? In other words, bullying and some of these things. The part that this doesn't tell, and I'm really curious about, is, and I talk about this a lot in my book, is what's the back and forth. So when you set these kind of rules and you think about things like this, it's not just about me as the parent telling my teenager these are the rules. It's about us as a family accepting that these are the rules for the family. And so if I screw up, then what's my consequence, right? And so what they're not talking about, and this is one thing that Common Sense Media does and some of this data, it's always talking about parent to child. It's not talking about child to parent. And that, I want you to hold on to that thought as we keep going. There's a couple little things. I promise this will come together. So now I want to talk about education. And again, it's talking about and looking at things today. So the New Media Consortium does the Horizon Report. And I think, how many of you are familiar with that? That comes out annually? A couple. Really great stuff. They do one for higher ed. I'm referencing K-12 here, thinking about young people coming up through the educational system. It's fabulous stuff because they look at what are the things that are coming this way. What do we have to be thinking about? So not only are we thinking about this as consumers, but now as educators in the classroom. And there's a list of amazing things here of the things that are going on right now that our educational systems are having to deal with. And I come from a rural area in Vermont, and I've had experience with my daughter in several different school systems, private and public. My partner has several children, and they're in public school in a very rural community. And yeah, that's not happening. That's not in small schools. They're lucky that they get all excited when someone drops Chromebooks on them, right? And then they're figuring out how to use Chromebooks. We're not even at that point of talking about visualization technologies. And social media is usually on lockdown, right? So these tools that are out there are, depending on the school system you're in, could be used or not used or have blocks or all sorts of things, right? So what they do in the report is they break things down by a time to adoption where we're going to have to be doing this in the classroom in a certain period of time. So bring your own device. Probably have heard of that before. I have IT people I know, and they really hate that because then there's multiple devices and multiple issues and multiple challenges, and nobody knows how to update the virus protection on their stuff, and then it gets into the network, and it's all big fun. Makerspaces, we're big on this at Champlain College. We actually have a makerspace for our MFA students and our students to be involved in. So that's a big thing that's starting to really happen. And I think that's coming out more and more, giving our children who are content consumers, not creators, a space in the classroom to actually make something, right? But tell me how I, as an educator, am supposed to do that when I don't know how to make something. Where's my training for that, right? So that's a short-term look. 2 to 3 years out, we've got 3D printing, but we've got 3D printing at Champlain. We're talking about that. How does it work in a classroom? Why would I use it in a classroom? Great educational questions. Adaptive learning technologies to help students and young people learn at their own pace. Really interesting things. I don't know if anybody's experimenting with that at this point, but according to the Horizon Report, that's 2 to 3 years out from that actually something happening in classrooms K to 12 that they're really going to be doing this. 4 to 5 years out. Digital badges. Anybody hearing about that? So it's an interesting idea, right? You do a couple of things, you get a badge. Yeah? Wearable technologies, right? So what wearable technologies, that's Google Cardboard for those of you who haven't seen that before, virtual reality. Where in 4 to 5 years starting to use these in the classroom. We're actually having conversations about digital badges at the college level at Champlain in the business school. When you get a couple of things together, rather than it being a certificate, let's give you a badge or something, right? Talking a lot about VR, but how would you use that in the classroom? I have a vision for what that could look like. You could all be home right now, sitting on the couch comfortably with your goggles on, and you could feel like you were right here. Save on gas. Not sure if it's as socially, contextually interesting as being in the room together for real. But they're talking about this in education. So for my K-12 educators in here, how do you feel about that? Thoughts? Excited? Worried? Worried? What is it that worries you?
Be kind of like down with it and be able to use it in my classroom, but I know a lot of people will not be able to. A lot of educators will not be. And so I don't know. I think it's dangerous because I think we were talking about it in class. I'm in the media education or the media literacy program here. We were talking about it and like if you hook this up to like a video game and people are shooting with virtual reality, it's kind of creepy.
Right, yeah, but here's the thing, with virtual reality, I can also take my students to a museum that they could never get to.
Yeah,
Right?
is that
Yeah.
the same as actually going there?
Well, so that's a great question. Is it? I don't know, but my
I mean,
goodness.
it's not, but
it's
is the
not.
value similar enough to make it worthwhile?
But
That discussion 20 years ago was.
Right, the immersive experience that VR is, outside of the part that
It might be cooler.
I get nauseous after a short period of time, but it's actually pretty wild.
But I mean, I'm concerned with this stuff, like, just because we can do something doesn't mean we should,
Well, and that's always been the question, right?
right? And kind of what Lauren was saying, like, why? What are we gonna do with it?
What's the pedagogy
You've
behind
seen it
it?
with the one-to-ones, like,
Right.
why? What are we doing with it?
Why do it? It's a great question. You had a,
I'm not a teacher, but I would say my concern with all of this would be who are the ones that are going to get access to it, and will it just continue to create kind of a divide between higher income versus lower income students? Who's going to be able to learn about the technology and therefore be that much more advanced when
Right.
they go out to college or when they go out to the job field?
right.
You know, so it's great stuff, but is it going to be creating a further divide?
Right, it's the structure that happens with it, yeah.
I worry about how the costs are coming down on the consumption end so quickly, but the costs for production are still quite high to put together a GoPro ball.
Right.
That it's something that lends itself really well to a consumption mindset in the classroom.
Yeah.
rather than a production.
Well, and that's just fascinating to think about where this could even go. Just the other day at F8, which is Facebook Developer Conference, I don't know if any of you follow that. It's sort of my wheelhouse, so I'm going to be taking a look at that. Facebook, you may or may not know, owns Oculus, which is a virtual reality tool, glasses system. And they announced a portable VR camera that we could set up right in here, and we could be doing VR right now. So it's definitely something that the bigger companies in media feel that that something's going to happen there. They've got a ways to go yet, but some of the stuff that I've played with has been really fascinating. Yeah.
I have some concerns about the research demonstrating harm from the electromagnetic fields involve low-level radiation and the possible links to cancer.
Yeah. Well, because essentially right now with a lot of this, I'm taking this phone, right, and putting it right here for a period of time. Right? So so with technologies like this, there's the world of opportunity. There's the world of opening people up to things that they haven't seen or experienced before. And then there's the other questions, right? And they're saying time to adoption, 4 to 5 years within K-12 education. And it's a really interesting thing to think about when we're wondering about media consumption, time with media, and where the value is for our students and for ourselves. So the challenges are pretty straightforward, right? It's like, you already asked that question. What am I going to do with this in the classroom? How's that authentic? Like, what's the learning moment there? How do I integrate this technology in helping teachers be educated, right? Like, okay, here, just like Chromebooks. Bam, here's the Chromebook. Go do the thing. I don't know what to do with this thing. Oh, but just go as a thing, right? I know how to use a stapler, but this is a little bit more complex. Like, how would I use it? Why would I use it? What does personalized learning even mean for young people? What does that mean for us in a system that is not about personalized learning? Well, then you get into the question of, well, what do teachers do anyway? These are the big existential questions. How do you even teach young people to do complex thinking and problem solving? Resiliency, things like that, when the tests are about the tests. We're about the testing, because the testing proves they learned something, which gets them to a college for a test, which proves they learned something. But can they think in complex ways at a time when we're bombarded with even more media stuff and we're losing our ability to think in complex ways, to discern information? In other words, what's happening to our media literacy? See, there's a theme here. It actually does come together. So just to add to this future thinking, now this is the Horizon folks saying, but this is what's like down there. STEAM learning, not STEM, but STEAM, because we put arts in there, right? Hey, there's this idea that art and math, and that it comes together. There's a place for it all, right? Students from consumers to creators. So remember, our young people now are predominantly consumers. How do we shift them to creators? More collaborative learning, shift to deeper learning approaches, rethinking how schools work. And I'd like you to hold on to this last bullet for a little while, because part of my answer to the earlier question is about that. So I want to get into the media now. So we've talked about young people, we've talked about people in general and our technology consumption. We've talked about schools and the things that they have to be thinking about. And here we are with the media. Now the Free Press Action Fund has a set of information about the big media companies. And they do that based on revenue. The most recent data they have on their website is, I think, from 2012. So I took the liberty of updating their data without actually doing their research, just looking at the new revenue to see where we are today. So, media ownership today, roughly. 75% of our media that we see comes from Comcast, NBC, Comcast, NBC, I don't know, they merged, they're big. The Walt Disney Company and Time Warner. This is in billions. Right, and then we've got CBS, Viacom News, iHeartRadio, which was Clear Channel, by the way. And Gannett. Gannett's still there because Free Press had it there, but they're kind of going like this. And I don't think I have to tell you that this is significant. Right, this is really significant.
And it's troubling for a lot of reasons, which you all know, right? When we have media owning everything from the channel and the pipeline to the content and everything, and then our young people spend how much time engaged with media a day? 9 hours. And it's no wonder that we are in a situation today where people have such a narrow view of things, right? Siloed kinds of things. But I wanted to go a little bit further. So Free Press actually does talk about some other channels. They do print. They also do internet. And as of if you go to their website, their internet folks are, from a couple years back, their big ones are Apple, Google, Microsoft, and Yahoo. Yahoo. But I decided to tweak it just a little bit, a little poetic license, if you will. I took Yahoo off and I put in Facebook. Because if you don't think Facebook is not a media company, it's a media company. Believe me, Facebook is a media company. You're creating a lot of the content for them, but Facebook is a media company. So this is in billions of dollars. Revenue, Microsoft is 93 billion. Apple is 233 billion. It's like, I don't know about you. I can't even, I just can't even imagine what that is. But Facebook is 17.9 billion. Now, considering all the things we're looking at and what we're watching, and the fact that Google includes Yahoo, Facebook includes Instagram and WhatsApp, and Facebook is announcing ways in which their messenger app will now deliver chat bots and all these other things to you. I thought, hey, maybe we should be looking a little forward here and take a look at these all together. Because I think this is when we talk about media, we need to look at this. Because the way we are getting our media is through internet companies. And when you look at this kind of number, you begin to see what's going to happen as we go forward. We are worried about a Comcast-Time Warner merger. Maybe we should be worried about a Microsoft-Comcast merger. Maybe we should be concerned about Facebook and the Walt Disney Company. Right? Maybe we should be thinking about, well, what happens when these squish even more? Because I guarantee you they will. Because the money is in the pipeline, the money is in the delivery devices, the money is in mobile. This is where it's going to go. So, setting all of that, there's some issues that I want to bring forward. I've talked about a few, but there's a couple things that I really want to bring forward. So, for example, I'm sure you've heard digital native and digital immigrant. All right, so what's a digital immigrant? Anybody want to tell me? What's a digital immigrant? Old people. Old people, all right. What's it?
I would say it's a little more complicated. Someone who, growing up with these tools or being immersed in the digital culture with these devices and tools and platforms wasn't always so. That they've had alternatives.
Right. Okay. So that makes me an electricity native and a running water native versus an electricity immigrant, like my grandparents, who didn't have electricity in their home. So does that mean I know how to wire a house? Yeah, so I mean, I think that's a thing to think about, because what we do is we think somebody who's grown up with the internet knows all about the internet. No, actually they know how to use the internet, just like Elaine knows how to turn on a light switch most of the time. Because some light switches have now gotten so sophisticated that there's scenes and things in my classrooms. I can set a scene for the wall. That's the CCM building. You people are nuts, I'm just saying. Like I'm at walls and ceilings. Like just give me a light switch to turn it on and off. So there's a thought leader in the public relations and communication space. His name is Brian Solis. He does some really great work, more on the business side of things. And he's talked more about Generation C. This idea not about an age, but really about the fact that we as a generation of people are connected. And I think when you think about it like that, you begin to separate not as by age, and because I'm old, I don't actually understand how to use the internet or things are confusing to me, or because I am young, I automatically know how it all works and can program a computer. We changed to the fact that the reality is, as a group of individuals, we are connected all the time. Like all the time. And we can all debate about whether that's good or bad, but we are connected. Generation C. I don't know about you. I've been doing this for a long time. I've started with a TRS-80 Model 1 computer, right? When I was 10. I've been teaching digital marketing and digital content for 15 years. I'm exhausted. Like, wow, this is hard. This is like I'm in the middle of class and I taught everybody a thing last week and I have a lesson plan, and then Google, Facebook, and Twitter all change things in 1 week, and I have to go back in that class and I have to redo everything and tell everybody the things we learned last week don't hold true anymore. Do-over, right? It's like, it's exhausting. How do you keep up? I can't imagine trying to keep up with some of the innovation grants that our K through 12 colleagues get. Like some person says, yo, here's this new cool thing, and we got a grant. There it is, go do the thing, whatever it is, right? And it's like, okay, now we have to learn the thing, and we have to program the thing, and we have to figure out how to use it as pedagogically in a classroom, and how do we do all that? How do we keep up? Technology innovation moves faster than our schools can. Budgets, funding, administrators, lock down things so you can't access internet tools. Let's have a big budget meeting about whether or not we should get a 3D printer and what it should look like and what we should do with it and who's going to maintain it and manage it. And by the way, by the time you made your decision, that 3D printer actually is gone and the new version's out. So we'll just start that conversation all over again. Like, our processes don't work. And this is I'm trying not to be political here, but you're going to get a sense of like what I feel from some of this. Capitalism and public policy is driving the media landscape. Things like the Telecommunications Act of 1996. Thank you. And capitalism, where my goal is to make the monies, and I'm Time Warner, and how do I make more monies? I'm Gannett, how do I stop the free fall? Right? So I need to make the monies. And that is driving our media landscape. Communities are not. These other forces are. And so then I've got this last bullet, the death of local community media. And I thought about, wow, should I really write that? That's probably not good to write. I hate it when people say the death of something. And yet I'm watching it happen. Some of the most vibrant, most interesting media channels, some of the ones that I enjoy the most up in Vermont, are struggling. And some of our best media folks in the print industry are our weeklies, and they do some amazing reporting. We're blessed in Vermont to have WDEV, which is, I think, the only independently run by ownership like radio station in the country now. I might have to check on that, but they've always owned it. And that's why we get music to go to the dump by on a Saturday, because in Vermont, everybody takes their stuff to the dump, and so you listen to it, right? So, I mean, that's the stuff I'm talking about, the stuff that they wish happy birthday to the people in the community, and they talk about community forums, and they have things that you really care about, and it's not this national content that comes at you that, all right, so I told you I had an FCC radio license. I did a little bit of radio at a time when you could listen to radio in many different places and hear really great different stuff, right? And now I could guarantee you we could hop on a bus right now, not that we have to, but we could. We could put on a radio station here, we could start playing it, and all of us within 3 seconds would know exactly what the content was at the radio station. And we could drive across the country and we could do that all along the way and find the same exact music and know exactly what it was, and they'd probably have the same playlist. You know, okay, that's because we have media ownership. Right? That's because that's happening. So we have this world of all of these things coming together, and this is what I see. I see a community, if I think about a community, I see media as this massive circle. And I see it kind of coming over families, and maybe I should have made it go a little bit even further over families. And I see education kind of touching families, but not really connecting with families. And I say that because the educational system that we have today means that as a parent, I get to go to open house, I get a parent-teacher conference, my kids come home and tell me about this bad teacher and that bad teacher, and if I'm proactive, I might call and say, did that teacher really do that thing? Or if I'm that kind of parent, I call the teacher and say, did you do that thing? And then I get test results. I get a chart that says, here's the line where your daughter's supposed to be, and here's where she is. And I'm like, what does that mean? So that's how I interact with education for my daughter when she was younger. And I don't really feel like I have a say in the educational process. I don't feel like anybody cares what I think my daughter should learn. And I don't have an open dialogue with that. And I suppose I could go to school board meetings. I could be more active that way, but it's really, I don't feel very connected. And then our local community, we've got some stuff going on there. I'm not as connected as I want to be to them. And wait, there's these people that give me a job. They're over here. But they drive whether or not I can get to my daughter's school, right? So to me right now, I see a media landscape, a community landscape that is silent and doesn't actually provide us the structure that we need in order to really embrace media literacy. So, let's imagine. What would it look like? This is the question I started with. To have media literate communities of learning. What would it look like? I, of course, have an idea. So I'm going to share it with you. Remember, Elaine is not a graphic designer. Right? It's not what I do. But in my, I don't know if I want to go so far as to call it a utopia, this is what I think. I would love a community where I, as a family member, as a parent, could go to the school on Friday because my employer lets me go. And as a matter of fact, I have a skill set that that school needs help with. And the teachers are struggling to figure out how do we manage social media. And the kids are, we got it all, we know what we're doing. And my employer lets me come into the school welcomes me, we talk about it with the young people and with the parents who also were able to get off from school. And we can all come together as a community to talk about Facebook, the changes that Facebook is making, why it's good, why it's not so good, and how can we use Facebook to create better connections with our teachers and with our students and with our families. In this world, employers are part of the schools because they have expertise that can help the schools. Schools change their structure so it's not 8 to 3. Sorry. I'll hide. But that it's like my work, right? And there's no homework. And they're at the school a longer time. And maybe employers let parents come in or other people come in to engage the students in a different way. Or the kids are in a maker lab creating things. But I'm invited in the school. It's an open door policy. I don't feel like I'm sneaking in. And community organizations, advocacy groups, local libraries, right? All of these great groups that are doing pieces and parts of really good work come together, and we create this space in a community where we all work together to create content and refuel our local media channels and create local media together with parents and teachers and employers and young people. We create that programming, and then what we do as a group is we drive public policy. Public policy doesn't drive us. We make those changes in the infrastructure to allow us to create a media literate community where we come together and local community access thrives. And then we better know how to get broadband access into rural areas and who should help us do that. And then we educate families who never had access in the first place. People who don't know, just let their kids go do the thing because they don't even know what to do with it. And so they're fully educated. And ignorance goes away, communities thrive, and that, to me, is what I would love to see happen. And by the way, that's the title. That's the Digital Village, right? That's how we all come together and we do this stuff together as a community. That's my thinking. What are yours? What are your thoughts? Yeah.
I was struck, I'll be a pessimist, sorry.
That's okay.
Public education itself is under assault.
Yeah.
And we're in a defensive position simply to protect a public education system that we recognize isn't very good, but it's under enormous criticism and enormous assault by the right. I'm deeply troubled by this charter school movement, privatization of schools, assault on teachers' unions. So I find myself, on one level, I am certainly sympathetic to many of the things you're saying, but then, I'll go back to Boston, and my wife's a member of the Boston Teachers Union, and there's a ballot question in Massachusetts this year to lift a cap. Sorry, I'm against it, so I can't say it. To lift entirely the cap on charter schools. Wow. Entirely. And it's a statewide ballot. Right now, it seemingly will pass. And they're not going to open up charter schools in the affluent suburbs of surrounding Boston. That's not going to happen. And these are being defined as public charter schools, and they're not public schools. Public money goes to them, but they're not publicly administrated. I shouldn't go on. What I'm getting at is schools need to do what you're saying, but what I find is we're in a total defensive position in certain ways. So
I want to reframe that just a little bit because sure. I totally hear what you're saying, and I'm not saying that, like I said, this is a utopia. This is, wow, what would it look like over there? There are so many challenges to get there. But I would reframe it that it's not schools that need to change, it's communities that need to change. And that, I think, from my perspective, is that there's clearly groups of people who are frustrated with the school system in some way. And somewhere, somebody's deciding that legislation to create a new system over here is better than engaging with what we have now to create new stuff. That's hard work. That's incredibly difficult work. And it's painful work. And and when children are involved and when your kids are involved, people, sorry if I offend anybody, we lose our minds. we just become very like, I want the best for my child, I want this, that, other thing. And the socioeconomic challenges that you highlight with just that conversation, I mean, there's a lot of touch points that make it very difficult. And it would be nice to wave a magic wand and have it all fixed. But I think that the only way we get to something like I'm imagining is probably incrementally, right? We'd love to start. People think a charter school is going to solve all the problems. We've seen some of that happen in Burlington, and they did some really good work with how they did that. It was hard. It was really hard. And so now we have an arts school, we have a science and technology school, and they're busing kids from their neighborhood schools all the way to these different places. But those schools are, and they've been doing that now, I think, 4 or 5 years. It could be a little off on the timing there. And it's mostly working now, but it's hard. It's a different model than what you're talking about in Boston. So it's a challenge, absolutely. It's fraught, really. Yeah.
Riffing on what the gentleman said, I agree with the assessment. We're in Northern California and a public charter but it's more historically the kind of public charter that was designed to keep autonomy and have alternative pedagogy. And so, in particular, it's a constructivist type school, but it's still under the rubric of the district. Technology is like it's a big thing, right?
Yeah.
And so they're wheeling out all the technology. They got a bond to wheel out the technology. And media literacy is core, I think, to many of the problems within the district, both with the community, the parents, the students, the school board, the superintendent, is at the root of it, because the people that are deploying it and using it see it as an elixir. It's the fix-all. We got to keep up. We got to keep up. But they have no policies behind it,
Right.
and they only trust the tech sector to tell them how to use it. They don't trust people that are experienced in media literacy to explain how to use it intelligently.
Right.
And so, in our particular district, it's just a train wreck.
Right.
You know, everything from no filters to K-12. Everybody gets it. Parents can't opt out, and there's no discussion of Wi-Fi technology, health affairs with young children whatsoever, despite WHO. Class 2B carcinogen, and et cetera, et cetera. The whole thing is a train wreck.
Well, and so,
If you go in and try to say anything about
Yeah.
these people, so I'm the bad guy.
Right.
Because that's fine, I'm used to the role. But it's difficult to have an intelligent conversation when what's at the core of the entire problem is literally media literacy, because the reason that they're ignorant about the policies and things in the first place is because they don't question the media where they get the information, and it's a terrible, terrible feedback.
Right.
and so that's one of the reasons why I talk about community education, right? Because we have a whole group of individuals who don't understand. And and this probably speaks to your point too, we're legislating and policying, I don't even think that's a word, from fear, from a fear-based. And then we have technology companies who have an agenda. All right? It's no different than Apple's agenda when they put the Mac 2s or the whatevers in the schools. There is an agenda there. And so there's ways to manage that, but that's not the way to bring employers into the schools, right? It's not, let's drop these tools in here. So the big challenge is educating, if you can educate the parents so they're not so afraid.
So I'm doing a lecture series every month. I have a symposium doing it to encourage a growing parent group. But this is going on for the last 3, 4, 5 years, and they already burned out 2 of the squeaky wheels.
Yep.
Right? And then they threatened to get lawyers, and then they shut that down through various loopholes. And so basically the genie's out of the bottle, and then they tell the teachers that they're supposed to try to deal with it and help manage it, when nobody has the background. I mean, unless they take the initiative themselves to get it.
Right.
But they're not being plied with even basic information. And
The administrators and the politicians and policymakers themselves don't understand.
No,
exactly.
Exactly
Right.
So it's next best thing.
It's a real
amazing thinking, and it's quick solution.
Yeah, it's a real challenge. I mean, and that's real. I mean, I see that even on a rural level
And they don't
in
want to be
Vermont.
educated about it.
Right, I see it on a rural level in Vermont, in a small microcosm where an administrator doesn't understand IT, and the IT people are trying to explain why they should change to this new system, and the administration is no, because the teachers don't like this system, and they didn't like the old system, but the IT people are talking to the teachers, the teachers like the old system doesn't make any sense, right, and nobody's talking.
Well,
right?
you're letting the tools drive the policy.
Exactly,
Instead of policy,
exactly.
adapting the tools and figuring out. how to use them.
Yeah. So I want to finish with you, and then we got to hand back there.
I haven't seen this film, but I've been reading a lot about it, and I participated at the Humanistic Psychology Conference at San Francisco State a month ago, and a big focus was media technology. Tiffany Schlein was there, and talking about media, screen fasts, and these kinds of things. There's a new film, Screenagers, that's getting on. Have you seen it?
I haven't seen it, but yeah.
Well, it's interesting in terms of seeing who's behind it and what's going on with it. It seems somewhat heartening that it's calling attention to like at least half of what you have here is like part of the film talking about what's happening about it. So yeah, I mean, I haven't seen it myself, but I've been reading a lot about it.
Yeah.
So I don't want to get a copy of the book.
Okay, awesome. I don't have copies with me, but you can order it online. It's print on demand, so it'll take a couple days to get it.
Mickey, what was the name of the film?
Screenagers.
Screenagers.
It's a film about the increased use of screen technology on teens and the psychological impact, societal impact, psychological impacts. Like I said, I haven't seen it, but I've been reading a bunch of stuff about it, and it's actually getting a lot of corporate media attention, which I find somewhat suspect. But it's nevertheless.
Yeah. So I'm going to take him and then.
Thanks. So I'm thinking a lot about what many people have already said. I also have a somewhat skeptical view of of technology, there's a big sort of framework about technology solutionism and Evgeny Morozov, who I tend to disagree with often because he's so negative and almost uncivil, if that even is a thing, in terms of that. But he has a point in terms of trying to sort of fetishize technology for the sake of an outcome. Yeah. And so, I think lots of us have been talking throughout the day, and I think, your talk suggests that technology should be used for particular ends rather than just fetishizing it because technology is there.
Absolutely.
I think lots of comments have suggested this, and there's lots of reasons why we should be wary of technology, whether it's exploitation or other sorts of things that come up psychologically or otherwise. But my big sort of concern with this issue comes down to sort of the role of media literacy or media education more generally as a chicken and egg question. I mean, I got into it simply because I think it is both the problem and the solution. It's the same thing we've been talking about today with journalism. Journalism is both the problem of the public and also the solution for the public. And I don't know if there's a question here, but I'm not sure what to do about that. Right. Because at the same time we're saying that media literacy needs to be what the future is. It's also the lack thereof or the kind of barriers standing in between our ability to address those issues. And I think we need to somehow figure out what to do about that.
And media literacy is one of the things I didn't talk about, but is if you look at the Common Core standards for K-12, right? And I have looked at them when I was writing my book, and I looked at them since, and I will say that based on what I'm seeing from young people and what I'm seeing from employers, because as a college professor, I get employers asking for certain skill sets, right? I'm right in the middle of all that. The fact that media literacy is not part of that conversation at all, when the employers are looking for people who can understand being not the right word, but apply and connect and problem solve and think through so much content that is all driven by technology tools that those companies are using. That they're at a point now where what I see happening, and I warn my students about this all the time, because of their age, it will be expected, just expected, that they will be able to come in and solve all the technology. Doesn't matter what it is. They can program this, they can write a Facebook post, they can build a website, and then they can, reconfigure the wiring, just because they're 22. And the challenge for everybody who cares about these issues is trying to get at those people who do not understand them because they're not educated in that space. And it comes from a place of fear. So I don't even have an answer either, right? Again, that was utopia that I'm talking about. I would love to see this happening. I know there's a lot of challenges that come to that. Yeah.
Elaine, before we go on, we would like to very soon unchain the hors d'oeuvres. So maybe 3 more questions formally.
I love that. That's great.
And then we'll keep it rolling.
All right. Cool.
It's a 2-part question. The first part's probably quick to answer, but I just give a chart of the amount of revenue those different media corporations are grossing. And I was wondering if that actually transitioned to how much of their media is consumed. For example, if we could put in units, like one unit of media and I put out 10, maybe he somehow makes 100 million, I only make 50 million.
Right.
So I was wondering that, and then second, I was wondering, in the chart you talk about moving students from consumers to creators. I was wondering, in there you're talking about basically the purpose of education. I'm wondering why that should be a purpose of education. You were talking about expanding broadband. And you had noted STEAM as well. And ironically, one of the problems I have with STEAM is it does emphasize things like engineering, but it's a sort of individualistic training for the employment world. But it's not teaching how the system actually works. So I'm not a big fan of economics, but if you're going to get a job and be in a market-driven field, you should at least figure out how the market works. And it seems like STEAM doesn't have a component for that. So I'm kind of wondering what do you think the purpose of education is, and also with that chart.
Okay. So I didn't take the next step to then what I was thinking, and I did think about this. Well, let me look at the revenue, and then let me dig further and look at users and see if I can. I didn't do that because it would be fascinating to see. Facebook says how many users they have, how many, and what does Nielsen say about some of these others? That sounds like a fabulous research idea, though, right? So I love that. Maybe it will be. I love that. It's great. And the second part, purpose of education. Okay. Well, in my...
That's 6 questions.
No, it's all right. It's all right. So what I like about... all right. So let me step back. So STEAM. So the idea to me, and I'm a college professor, so remember that I come from that space. What it is doing is it is highlighting for a lot of people that there's a set of skill sets and things that people need. It's a different toolkit than maybe they needed years ago. And I like that. I think that's important. The question for an educator, as always, is if I have the toolkit, how do I teach the students to use the tools in a way that is, sorry for my marketing language, strategic and thoughtful and actually addresses whether they're problems or challenges or opportunities, right? So the only parallel I can tell you is when I teach digital marketing, I teach my students the tool. There's tools. There's Google Analytics, and there's Facebook, and there's platforms that are really tools. Knowing the platform and the tool does not help them if they do not understand the importance of writing really good content and thinking to reach a group of people to connect with them and understanding which tool is the right tool for the job. My job as the teacher is to introduce them to the tools and then how to use them the right way in the context of that strategy. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but that's what I think education needs to do. That's the best I got. All right, so I got 2 hands back here. I'll take you first.
Going off of what you said about media literacy being sort of both problem and solution, and Nolan, I think, connected to your question of the purpose of education, I think when we're looking at media literacy as problem and solution, we have to ask who's media literacy. Mm-hmm. Because I think there's a lot of people in this room who probably come at it, I know ACME and mass media, we come at it from a position of critical inquiry and certainly a critique of the mainstream, the mass media, and these very, very small companies that have so much power. But there are, I think, plenty of people who have no idea what that means and claim to know what media literacy is. Plenty of people who you take corporate money or who work for corporations that say, we're, the X, Y, and Z publishing company are going to teach you media literacy through our text or whatever, which, climb that abstraction ladder.
Right.
And certainly when you're talking about community and policy somehow working together in a different way, the policymakers have no idea.
Right.
And we've gone to legislators in Massachusetts and have been like, okay, so here's why media literacy is important. And they're like, so great, what's media literacy?
Yeah.
Is that about violence prevention?
I'll just argue just a little bit, just for funds. As educators, our job is to educate. So when you go into a room of legislators who are sitting around a table and you talk at them, they are just like any other student. Wah, 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 don't get it. What would happen, again, utopian, if you said, all right, I'm coming in, but I'm not going to talk to you. Here's an exercise. I want you to get in small groups. I want you to talk to each other about this issue, this issue, this issue. Okay, so now here's the problem. So I want you to take 5 minutes and I want you to come up with 3 reasons why you can deal with this. And then here's this other issue. Let me show you a quick video. All right, go. What would happen? I don't know what would happen. They'd freak out. They wouldn't have seen it before, but they might learn something. Just a thought.
I work with largely working class African Americans, and my concern, and this is all galvanizing this in my head, is that media literacy to me is secondary to basic civic and public literacy of public policy, because and let me explain, that we're so focused on teaching people how the media systems work economically and then how to use different technologies, but how do you prevent this company from coming in and gentrifying your neighborhood? And is that really a media issue? It is, but are there other underlying issues that, is there something at the very base that you have to understand? How do you deal with the police? And certainly you can use social media and things like that, but the basic underlying issue, and I think that that's what's being lost when we're really starting to emphasize media literacy, is that people just don't have the basic tools to challenge
Right.
institutional anything, let alone other problems
Yeah.
related to the media.
Yeah. Now, this hand is like, Bill's like going like this,
So,
so.
I think that's such an important part
Yes.
of all of this. But what I would speak to is, there's a former FCC chairman who wrote a book called Your Second Priority.
Nicholas Johnson.
And his argument was, no matter what your first priority is, your second priority has to be media, because media plays such an important role in structuring what everybody you're trying to reach knows about that issue. So what they know about gentrification, or what they know about poverty, or what they know about community violence, or homelessness, or the environment, it's all coming at them from media.
Right.
So even if we have other first priorities, we still can't ignore media, because that's going to make the difference about whether people listen to us or not.
So let me piggyback on that really quickly, because one thing I didn't touch on that now that opens the door to make this really clear is, so we have TV channels and we have internet channels, right? How many of you are really familiar with what's happening on some of the big internet channels that people are paying attention to? And by that I mean Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Do you really know what's going on there? Because this plays directly into what you're talking about media or advocacy or systems, or what comes first. When you are worried about 3 major companies deciding what we see on TV and hear on radio or see in print, you should be frightened about what is happening with Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Okay, they are deciding what you see based on algorithm. That algorithm determines the content you see from the people you're connected with based on your online behavior. So let me break that down for you. What that means is, when I open up my web browser and I go into Facebook, I have a certain amount of friends that I'm connected with. I have a certain amount of pages I have liked. Facebook is only showing me a certain percentage of that content based on the 5 places I went to yesterday online.
Yeah.
But not just on my desktop, on my phone. Google is serving up search results to me based on what I'm seeing in Facebook. So, yeah, it's really sucky that Walt Disney and Time Warner and these other people are funneling this kind of stuff this way, but if I'm spending 9 hours a day connected to this, and Google is tracking everything I'm doing, and Facebook has my information, and I'm logging into places with Facebook, then I am only seeing what an algorithm thinks I should see. Which is why the Microsoft bot went haywire on Twitter. Because it was only seeing racist, horrible things. So it started tweeting racist, horrible things. But that is a metaphor for what is happening in this area. So I would say that media, very important, even to what your point is, in neighborhoods and communities all over the country who don't understand certain things, this is making it even worse. Sorry, I got a little preachy there, but that's like, that's the next big thing.
So the name of the book is Tuned In Family. Read it.
Do it.
Connect.
And how to communicate, cope, and connect, something like that.
Yeah. And it's really fantastic, and so is Elaine, and so are all of you, and we have our coach.
Thanks, everybody.
Conversation going. Please avail yourselves.
Feel free to